The track, we find out that the track was a remarkably straight track all the time toward the west-northwest from the time it developed in the eastern Caribbean Sea, as a matter of fact, until it made landfall in Mexico. Now, we were, to be sure, looking at some computer models as the storm passed the Yucatan Peninsula that suggested that the storm might turn more toward the northwest. And the reason that I believe that it didn't do that was that this was just an enormous storm, and what it did, it threw a whole lot of very warm air up into the atmosphere into very high levels, and we had a big high pressure aloft, and that actually helped steer it more toward the west itself, and the computer models didn't really handle that all that well. But we never thought that this was more than a possibility from the time that the storm left the Yucatan Peninsula, showing the probabilities and all that. It always said that the most severe threat was to northeastern Mexico and the extreme southern part of Texas.
Well, of course, as you pointed out before, these coastal areas are so overdeveloped at this point. The evacuation routes aren't there, so even if the possibility exists, it's a good idea for these residents to leave.
Well, it is, but I think in retrospect that we need to know that after all, the eye passed about 120 miles south of Brownsville, Texas when it came inland, and at that point it was the nearest to the United States. Now that is way outside the area of the strongest hurricane force winds. The eye was about 30 miles in diameter at that time, and let's say the eye wall was about 15 miles thick or so, and that means that Brownsville, Texas, in other words, the nearest part of the United States to the hurricane, was at least 70 or 80 miles north of the eye wall itself.
So that's good news for
it was for them, and they did not score a direct hit, and they need to know that the core of the hurricane was indeed in Mexico, not in Texas.
Okay. And as far as that's concerned, John, once again, we're going to talk about the fact that the reconnaissance aircraft is very important in tracking these storms so that we can alert the situation to these coastal residents.
We think it's extremely important to have the reconnaissance out there, and we hope that we will not see the end of that. Anybody who has had the responsibility of forecasting for landfalling hurricanes in the United States hopes that we maintain reconnaissance aircraft, because we believe that's the only way that will tell us exactly how strong the hurricane is. That's the thing we worry about the most, because there's a tremendous difference here whether we're talking about a category 3, 4, or 5, and we think that reconnaissance aircraft, we need that to help us do that.
Right, we have a caller on the line from Charleston, South Carolina. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Hope, what are the chances of a hurricane like Gilbert developing again?
Well, we hope all we have to go is past history, and it's very rare that during a given season that we see 2 hurricanes of this magnitude. And of course, we've never had one of this magnitude before as far as the pressure is concerned, so we think that it's unlikely we'll get one that strong. But we have had seasons where we had 2 or 3 strong hurricanes, so there certainly could be at least one more very strong hurricane.
Right, thank you very much, John. Keep in mind, we'll be back in just a few minutes. You can call 1-800-541-6056 and talk to John Hope live. Stay tuned. Do we have Bedford? Go ahead, please. All right. John, it appears that we lost that phone call right now. We do have a tropical wave to talk about, however.
Yeah, I know some people were concerned about that. What we do, it's way out there in the Atlantic Ocean. It's about 200, or 2,000 miles rather, east of Barbados. It's moving toward the west now about 15 miles an hour. It does seem to be getting a little better organized, and yes, we think it does have a chance to become a tropical storm, but we'd like to take it one step at a time. It's not even a depression yet. It's got to be a depression, then a tropical storm, and then a hurricane. But from what we can see, there is a chance that this would go ahead in the next 2 or 3 days and get better developed, but it's more than a week away from this part of the world, so lots of time to watch it.
All right. We do have a caller on the line from New York City. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Mitchell, and I'm just curious as to the reason why a lot of these tropical storms seem to lose their strength as they travel up the coast. Would you have an answer for that one?
Yes, indeed. They do that because they lose their energy source, which is warm water. Now what we find is that they need a temperature of 80 or 82 degrees Fahrenheit to go ahead and grow and maintain themselves. But if they go up the East Coast, once they get north of the Gulf Stream, which is about a beam of Hatteras or a little north of there, then they begin to run over colder water, and the water gets colder very quickly. Now, in order for a hurricane to go into New England or Long Island as a major hurricane, it needs to go pretty fast, because it's not how far it goes over this colder water, but how long it takes it to do that. So most of the major hurricanes that have hit up in the Northeast have been going very fast, a lot of them 50 miles an hour. One that just goes very slow will die out a whole lot before it gets to Long Island or to New England.
All right, thank you, John. We do have a caller on the line from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Go ahead, please.
Yes, if Hurricane Gilbert was to have come up to Mobile, if it came up that way, the same category hurricane, and there was a strong cold front coming out of the northwest, like it was up in northern Alabama or so, would Hurricane Gilbert roll through the cold front, or would it slide along the cold front?
No, it wouldn't go through the cold front. A hurricane is not going to go through a cold front. It would kind of tend, though, to slide along it. As long as the front was in northern Alabama, by the time the hurricane got to Mobile, the front might not affect it very much. But no, the hurricane will not go through a cold front, but it would be much more likely to just slide up northeastward along it.
The Days in 5-Day Business Planner, which is normally seen at this time, will be shown immediately after Weatherview. We still have time to take some more of your phone calls. Tropical weather and hurricanes, the major news story across this entire country this week. John Hope with us to answer a call from Parsippany, New Jersey. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Hope, I'd like to ask you a question regarding the impact of wind on people and cars. When children are crossing the street or adults are walking and winds go 40, 50, 60, 70, can they still walk? Can a car still move and drive on pavement if the winds get up to 65? What does that mean for an adult or a child or driving a car? At what point is it impossible?
Well, I wouldn't want to drive a car with 60 or 70 mile an hour winds unless I had to. Don't forget that if you're driving your car into the wind, then you have to add the speed of your car to the wind. So if the wind speed was 80 and you were only going 20, that'd be driving into a 100 mile an hour wind. So that would be pretty dangerous. And as far as children or even adults, well, once the wind gets up very high, 75 or 100 miles an hour, it's almost impossible to walk. You have to hold on to something, so it's very difficult indeed. You have to remember that the wind speed, the force varies as not the wind speed itself, but the square of the wind. So if you double the wind speed, then you're increasing the force 4 times. If you triple it, you increase it 9 times.
We have a call on the line from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm wondering, could the beneficial remains from Hurricane Gilbert give some relief to the drought-stricken areas of the plains?
Well, it's already done that to some extent, and it continues to do that. We have some very heavy rains now out in the western part of Texas, and they're moving up into Oklahoma, and they will be moving up farther toward the northeast. And there's still an awful lot of rain with the system, but one thing about it now is that it's begun to move faster, and that means that even though the rate of rainfall is still high, it's not going to rain as much in any one place as it did in Mexico, for example, because it's moving too fast. And incidentally, we might point out that the rainfall in the northern part of Mexico there in the mountains was disastrous. We've had reports of 150 or 200 people being killed there, and that means that as far as fatalities are concerned, that the worst thing that happened with the storm happened in Mexico after it was down to a tropical depression. Very, very heavy rains in the mountains caused that.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, John. And keep in mind that John will be monitoring the tropics right here on the Weather Channel, so look for the tropical update every hour on the Weather Channel. John, as far as the Category 5 situation with this hurricane, can you explain to us a little bit how they do categorize hurricanes? Because we've gone from 1 to 5 on this one.
Well, it has to do almost entirely with the wind speed. To be Category 5, you have to have sustained winds of 155 miles an hour or higher. If it's more than 131 miles an hour, it's a Category 4. If it's more than 110 miles an hour, it is a Category 3, and so on.
All right. Next week, we'll talk about global crisis. We'll air during this hour. And keep in mind, we'll be back for Weatherview. Keep in mind. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Weather View. Next week, we'll have global